This is a brief commentary on some factual errors in a YouTube video put out by Todd Grande, who goes by Dr. Grande. He has a Ph.D. in something like consulting education. And he does videos, very popular, has over 1 million subscribers. And they are mostly about some current events and a lot of true crime cases where he does sort of a psychological analysis of the situation and often the alleged perpetrators of the crimes in the case of crimes, or sometimes public figures. He's done a number of videos recently on Meghan Markle, for example. Has a slightly sarcastic sense of humor, and some of the videos are quite entertaining. A few days ago, Paul Pelosi, the husband of Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, was allegedly attacked by an apparently mentally disturbed individual. The news is still coming out, so I'm not going to really comment very much on what happened, because I think it's way too early to know if we'll ever know for sure what actually went on. Todd Grande put out a video very quickly, just came out like yesterday, which is, so today is Halloween, October 31st, 2022. He put out a video entitled "Attack by a Conspiracy Theorist" with a question mark, which is appropriate. I'm not sure we know to what extent this person was a conspiracy theorist. Apparently there are internet posts to that effect. And he makes various analysis, goes over what happened, and he makes some statements about conspiracy theories in the past and conspiracy thinking that, in my research and knowledge of the subject, are simply incorrect. They're factually wrong, and they illustrate perhaps that a lot of people's understanding of conspiracy ideas and literature is based on distorted accounts, and maybe they read the New York Times or the NPR or somebody like that, where either they don't really research these things or they misrepresent, the so-called conspiracy ideas regularly. Now, I've been interested in conspiracies or conspiracy theory and that sort of thing, at least since the 1980s, when I lived in Pasadena. I went to the California Institute of Technology. Now, one of the curious things about Pasadena and San Marino, which is this super rich city, just a town really, just south of Pasadena, and San Marino was the headquarters of the John Birch Society, the notorious conspiracy group that dates back at least to the late 1950s. And so I actually came across some of their material in used bookstores and other places in Pasadena while I was there, and spent a lot of time studying some of these topics, which can be quite fascinating. They can be addictive, and probably there's some truth in some of them. And I'll talk a little bit about that. But what I want to talk about is a couple of places where Todd Grande makes statements that are, it seems to me, remarkably inaccurate and false in, to some degree, blaming, as you'll see, the attack on the conspiracy theory community, whatever that is. Okay. All right. So let's start. I'm going to run a video here of the first. It's not as big a deal, but I do think it's just obviously wrong. So this is a snippet from his full video, which you can see the link, or just go to his website or YouTube channel.
Looking at the first question, why has Nancy Pelosi attracted so much negative attention from certain figures on the far right? There's something about Nancy Pelosi which really aggravates right-wing extremists and conspiracy theorists. She is a frequent target of criticism, despite there being other high-profile figures available, like Joe Biden or Kamala Harris.
Now, anyone who follows politics in general, or especially like conspiracy, would know perfectly well that both Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, especially Joe Biden, are the target of extensive attacks by conservatives, the far right. He likes the term far right a lot. And of course, conspiracy theory are people who are alleged to be conspiracy theorists. Now let's focus specifically on Biden, because Biden has been the target of very high profile allegations of criminal conspiracy by all sorts of people. Notably, we went through a saga in which the Democrats attempted unsuccessfully to impeach Donald Trump in late 2019 and early 2020 for investigating Biden's activities in the Ukraine, which we're now, of course, embroiled in the middle of with a proxy war with the other major nuclear power in the world. Okay, and that focused specifically on the activities of his son, Hunter Biden. Of course, we may recall the Hunter Biden laptop story, which was, continues to this day, but was a big deal right before the election. And it involved the constant repetition of certain things, such as, for example, that Hunter Biden had received a huge, apparently no work required job from Burisma, this Ukrainian energy company, for about 18 months. He got something in excess of $1 million. It was part of a whole series of rather iffy sounding transactions between Hunter Biden and also some of other of President Biden's relatives that produced conspiracy theories that, maybe these were like bribes, to be blunt about it. Now, that's way up there in conspiracy theory land. And of course, there are books alleging all kinds of questionable dealings by Hunter Biden, by President Biden's brother, and some other people connected to President Biden. That's way up there in conspiracy land. And it's gotten much more attention over the last couple of years than many complaints about Nancy Pelosi. But that's just factually incorrect. And of course, Kamala Harris has been bitterly attacked more for her incoherent word salad answers. And Todd Grande has an amusing video about Kamala Harris. But the political right, of course, has also attacked Kamala, who's proven to be an easy target in a number of respects. But if one were to talk about conspiracy theory and theorists, there's absolutely no question that Biden has been right in the bullseye up to the present, with lots of questions about his activities in the Ukraine and our little war in Ukraine that might lead to World War III, nuclear Armageddon, Holocaust, all that kind of stuff, right? Okay, so that particular snippet is just factually way off. Now let's talk about a remarkably inaccurate portrayal of the history of conspiracy theories, in which he argues that in the past, the conspiracy theories were not specific. They didn't name specific politicians like Biden or Pelosi or public figures like David Rockefeller, for example. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, or J.P. Morgan or Cecil Rhodes or many other people who, in fact, figure prominently in historical conspiracy theories long before the internet and the modern era. And I'll talk some more about that. So here we go. Here is the next snippet where we get some grossly inaccurate information about the history of conspiracy theories.
Those who are vulnerable to conspiracy theories now have an ever-present, intense, and frightening narrative with which they can connect. People who have pronounced conspiratorial thinking often demonstrate cluster A personality pathology. They have schizoid, schizotypal, and paranoid personality features. Years ago, people like this didn't really have many places they could go to connect with other people about their beliefs. The conspiracy theories they came up with would follow predictable patterns and often involve aliens, the CIA, the FBI, and evil government conspirators. There wasn't much specificity with the conspiracy theories. No one person was singled out. Rather, the people maintained a general fear of an unknown enemy. They didn't feel as though they could do anything about it, other than complain to anyone who would listen. These days, with the internet and social media, a person with conspiratorial thinking can easily engage in a larger and more highly organized conspiracy theory, like QAnon. In a sense, ease of communication led to the construction of a community. This community is fed by political polarization. They use that as their raw material to build conspiracy theories. These factors come together to facilitate a higher level of organization. With this organization, people can manufacture content for conspiracy theories 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There is a seemingly endless supply which radicalizes people who have conspiratorial thinking. In addition, the conspiracy theories are now filled with a lot of details, like the names of politicians who are supposedly evil conspirators. The people being falsely portrayed as the bad guys are no longer nameless. With this structure in place, instead of just having conspiratorial beliefs, people are motivated to act on them. There is a next level, which is described in the organized conspiracy theories, and people desire to achieve that level. Conspiracy theorists now see a solution to the fabricated problem, whereas years ago they never did. Essentially, people who were paranoid and having magical thinking are now being given directions and encouraged to act. I think this is what happened in the case of David DePape. He was not inspired to violence exclusively due to an inconsiderate and destructive political debate. Rather, it was the entire conspiracy theory community that played a part. The attack on Nancy Pelosi is a symptom of a larger problem. It was partially caused by intellectually lazy arguing, which primarily features personal attacks. Those are my thoughts in the case of Paul Pelosi and David DePape. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be as intriguing as tiny mythical creatures calling a locksmith to get in their house. Thanks for watching.
The tiny mythical creatures are alleged belief in fairies by the alleged attacker on Paul Pelosi. Now, there's a very serious flaw here in this account, which is that conspiracy theories, what are labeled as conspiracy theories, have been around for hundreds of years. They're actually very detailed books that were produced by various people in the aftermath of during the French Revolution, one by a prominent Scottish Freemason, John Robison, alleging a conspiracy behind the French Revolution in the 1790s. It's a big, thick book. Another character named Abbé Barruel, who's a former Jesuit priest in France, he produced a whole series of books alleging a conspiracy. These were the Illuminati, the famous Illuminati, the secret organization within the Masonic movement that allegedly engineered the French Revolution and possibly the American Revolution. The Illuminati, Abbé Barruel's theory got far more complex, and he specifically linked the Illuminati to the Rothschilds family, specific people by name. And this is the case for many, many, many years, that it's not some vague, completely unidentified group that you just sort of worry about like Todd Grande describes. No, conspiracy theories are very detailed and have been detailed long before the internet. They name names, they identify people as probable members of the conspiracy, identify front organizations like the Freemasons, like the Trilateral Commission, and David Rockefeller and people like that, long before the internet. They're very specific. They identify specific politicians. And in some cases, these beliefs, however true or false they might have been, have led to violence. An example which is perhaps should be known to most Americans is that the Morgan Bank, what is now JP Morgan Chase, the Morgan Bank was the biggest and most powerful bank in the United States at the time of the First World War. The Morgan Bank and the Morgan family had close ties to England. Morgans were actually educated at British prep schools. We would call them prep schools. The family was originally from Wales. Morgan is a Welsh name. And there was a conspiracy theory widely held, which is prominent in most conspiracy theories to this day, that the Morgan Bank, sometimes acting with other banks and people, was very pro-British. They were the U.S. purchasing agent for both England and France before the U.S. entered the war. That this bank was behind an attempt to get the U.S. into the war, which of course happened, that they were conspiring with the British government and other people. Rothschilds turn up here fairly often, variations on this theory. People took this very seriously, so seriously that there were several unsuccessful attempts to assassinate J.P. Morgan, Jack Morgan. So the famous J.P. Morgan is his father, and then he took over the bank. And actually, one guy almost killed him in these attempts. This guy goes to his, this mansion in, I think it was in Manhattan, somewhere in New York City, bangs on the door. The butler shows up, points a gun in his face and says, "Take me to Morgan." So the butler, desiring to continue to live, goes and takes him to Morgan. And he shot Morgan, if I remember the story correctly. And then Morgan tackled him. Morgan was a big guy. He was like 6 something. He was a big burly guy, knocked the guy down, survived, right? He wasn't taking it, right? There were a whole bunch of these attempts to do this, to kill Jack Morgan specifically, perhaps not unlike Paul Pelosi in some respects. So all of this has happened many times in history, of course. When I was a kid in the 1970s, the Trilateral Commission, which is overlapped remarkably with the Carter administration. Jimmy Carter, Walter Mondale, almost every top person in the Carter administration happened to be a member of this tiny little group set up by David Rockefeller and Zbigniew Brzezinski. People may not realize that Carter had just been like governor of Georgia. He seemed like a nobody. He comes out of nowhere, kind of like Barack Obama. And suddenly he's president, runs over all these other much more established politicians. He's He's running things, or at least appears to be running things. There are all these conspiracy theories about the Trilateral Commission. They were also bipartisan because George Herbert Walker Bush, who became president and was vice president under Reagan, of course, was also a member of the Trilateral Commission. And keep in mind, this was a tiny group of very rich people, of very prominent figures like Harold Brown, who became the Secretary of Defense. People often seem to have close connections to the Rockefeller family and businesses. Now, my point in all of this is these theories are detailed. They name names. They've done that for literally hundreds of years, going back almost certainly to the French Revolution. It's nothing new. And sometimes people take them seriously, and maybe they should. And sometimes people act, at least in part, as happened in World War I with the attempts to kill Jack Morgan, on this belief that the Morgan Bank was plotting with various and sundry other people to basically get the US into World War I on the British side. We might think about other things like our current situation in the Ukraine and certain conflicts of interest that the president might have. But this illustrates something that one frequently encounters in discussions of alleged conspiracy theories, which generally seems to be used to claim to just dismiss something as like there couldn't be anything to that. And don't even think about it, don't even read about it. Because people who throw around conspiracy theory label, like Todd Grande, often act like they don't really know very much about the actual conspiracy theories that they're denouncing. They either have simply picked up very distorted pictures from reading some article in the New York Times or some other source that dismisses these things, and they bring in like David Icke with the shape-shifting reptilians or other seemingly rather kooky ideas. But there's a lot more to conspiracy theories, as I've mentioned, like things like the Trilateral Commission or allegations about the Morgan Bank, and they are very specific. And again, the people who vilify conspiracy theories often act like as if they don't know the specifics. In fact, as Todd Grande says, oh, well, it was not very vague. No, a lot of them are very specific. They have very specific allegations. They have specific events or payments or memberships in certain groups like the Trilateral Commission that they point to as specific evidence of their theories and of who is in the conspiracy and what they're trying to do. Somehow that generally a lot of that information never shows up in mainstream media accounts of the conspiracy theories, which gives you a kind of false impression of what they are. You have to actually go to the conspiracy theories, their books and websites and other information, and read through the material, which can be a big project. Just like reading these books that were written about the French Revolution is quite a project. Reading a lot of these things, the evidence that they present, however good or bad it is, and it varies in quality, is a big project. It's much easier for a lot of people just to read a quickie article in some political journal or something, or the New York Times, that dismisses it all and starts talking about aliens and shape-shifting reptilians and other kinds of things. So we don't know what the situation is with Paul Pelosi or this attack. It just happened a few days ago. We may, as is often the case with these murky events, never really be sure what went on. The point, though, is that the term conspiracy theory is used to shut down discussion of various issues, has been for many years now. Many people who are using it either don't actually know what these conspiracy theories are, or they pretend that they don't know. I don't really want to get into the details of David Rockefeller's activities or various murky goings on involving other targets, the Freemasons or the Communist Party, or, there's all sorts of these theories and some varying degrees of plausibility and varying levels of evidence in favor or opposed to the theory.
This concludes this video presentation. If you like this video, please click like. Please click subscribe and the notification bell if you would like to receive more content from us. You can avoid internet censorship by subscribing directly to our RSS news feed. Please consider sharing the link by email and on your website or blog, in addition to liking, upvoting, or sharing on increasingly censored, advertising beholden, big company social media. We have encountered such censorship. Mathematical software is developing algorithms and software to automate data analysis, reducing the risks of costly errors and increasing the predictive power of the results. You can support our work financially by subscribing on our Patreon page, https://www.patreon.com/mathsoft, or scanning the QR code in the lower right corner.